Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined, as always, by Nick Pollack. Nick and I saw each other multiple times this weekend in person at Tout, which is amazing. And we have real baseball, real live MLB regular season games coming tomorrow, the Japan series. So we are full on. However, a lot of you still have drafts coming up this final week before the regular everybody opening day. And so we're going to help you through those last drafts because Nick published an article just before the weekend. You told me you were working hard to get it out. But you publish something you do every day, which is the Ultimate Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide. So before we get into the topic for today, just tell people a little bit of like, what is the draft guide? If they find it over on pitcherlist.com, what can they use it for? How does it benefit them?
Absolutely. So this guide actually goes really well with the live draft assistant tool that we just launched. And I will go more into that later, but that's for PL Pro members. This is a guide of just like, hey, I'm drafting in your standard 12-teamer draft. I know so many of you have listened to some fantastic people in the industry who kind of focus more on 15-teamers or your weekly fab stuff and in your points leagues. This is your Yahoo standard 12-teamer. You can really apply this a lot to 10-teamers too. And I really wanted to outline, hey, these are the hitters who I'm generally going for that I like. And I've also identified certain positions for hitting that I think you need to target at certain points, whereas Ariel Cohen would say the hot spots are where there's a lot of good value at this point. Because not everybody's going to be drafted in the same order. It's like, you know what? Because there's so many guys, that means that you can get third baseman in the 7th round, 8th round because Mark Vientos is amazing. Or you could say things like, well, you need to jump early because there isn't anything later on, like at second base. So this really outlines that and then embraces the thing that you've heard 20 million times this offseason, which is you got to wait on pitching. I want to say to everybody listening right now, you don't have to.
Right.
I do that because I do the SP Roundup every day and my streaming article every day and the list every week, which means that you can follow this guide and then you can follow me the entire season and we will do it together, right? You can watch me on playback.tv/pitcherlist, which is another thing I can't wait to do. I'm going to be hanging out with you a little bit on opening day.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Eric, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but oh man, playback.tv guys /pitcherlist. You want to be there if you're a baseball fan this year. But long story short, you're going to be getting a lot of these guys and then you're going to figure out who you want to be getting as your upside flyers. Go hitters, then you go tons of pitchers, and then you figure out what the heck you want after that.
Yeah. I'll just add before we dive into it, two things that I have always said as we talk about draft strategy. First, the first one is understand that this is a general strategy you go into a draft with, and you have to adapt within the room that you are in, right?
Yes.
If everybody's taking hitters, and you want to take a pitcher because really good pitchers are falling, great. But also know, as we talked to people at Tout Wars this weekend who had this experience too, is that if everybody is drafting hitters and pitching tends to be a value, you may consistently see pitching value and you may be like, oh, I'm going to take this value because it's here. And the next thing you know, you've taken 5 pitchers with your first 9 or 10 picks and you're like, well, I was taking value. And then you may not have any hitters. So it's just important to read the room, and you can zag a little bit, but you want to make sure that you are sticking to what generally, as much as you can, to what your strategy was going in. If you deviate a little here and there, that's fine. And the other thing that I will just say is like, listen, if you're playing in a league that's multiple thousands of dollars to get in, and the stakes are super high and you really want to hammer down on like, what is the most efficient way for me to draft a team? Cool. If you are doing this like many of us are, where like many of us have leagues where we've been playing in them forever and the money might not be a lot, but the bragging rights are super important. But also, like, most of us started doing this for fun, right?
Exactly,
we started doing this because we enjoy baseball and this is a fun game. And so understand the league that you're in. And we all have leagues where I may want to take Garrett Crochet early because I like the Red Sox.
You want to root for the guy. Get the guys that are fun. And this is why I actually push some names down that I know will go earlier, like Taj Bradley, because it's not fun for me to be a manager of Taj Bradley. I'm sorry, but it's stressful. And it drives me up the wall. I don't want to feel that way about my players.
Right.
So I don't go for those. And I do want to really lean into, we have a live draft assistant that's a Google Sheet. That itself as its own product, amazing. It was last year. It was again this year. We just did our Tout Wars drafts this weekend. I used our Google Sheet for my auction. And I was actually looking around the room, the other software that some people were doing, some weren't even really using it. Mine was just, it was so easy to do and quick and easy. I could see everything super fast. It's great. And we also just launched for everyone that is in more of your straightforward leagues. They don't really need all the complexities. It's just like your Yahoo league, and you just want to keep tabs with who's the best guy to get in my cheat sheet and all. Guess what? We launched this beautiful in browser live draft assistant where you can have multiple drafts in there. You can have them saved. You can do keeper leagues inside of here because you just click on any cell and assign any player in any team to that cell. And it's lovely and easy to use, super quick. Has all of our cheat sheets with our PLV projections inside of it. Really quick presets for your settings. You just go through it and it's done. You want to use that, and you can get it at PL Pro. So go to pitcherlist.com/premium, use promo code podcast to get 15% off PL Pro yearly. It is a lifesaver, let me tell you, when you just don't know who's still available, who you should go for. We've got you guys covered. You can actually even like set targets in colors to say like, hey, I want to make sure I get this guy or that guy. And it's with our PLV projections, which are phenomenal for hitters. And you can just follow the list if you want for pitchers. I got you there.
Yeah. And in this podcast, we're going to primarily talk about, or we're actually just going to exclusively talk about the starting pitchers. But I did want to just go to some overall strategy things, which are pitching relevant that you have at the top of your article. And so I just wanted you to just very quickly clarify for the people on the podcast a couple things you mentioned at the top. First one, you said you are not drafting a best ball team.
Oh my gosh.
What does that mean?
Oh my gosh. I even saw this over the weekend. It drives me nuts. I'm in Tout Wars. It's a 12-teamer with an unlimited IL spot. And I see people drafting players thinking that this is their team for the entire year. It isn't. Look at your teams from previous seasons and tell me how many you kept after the 14th round. Just that you drafted and held throughout the entire year. It's minimal. It also means that those guys that we always get worried about with injury risks, that you can do the injury risk plus the replacement for so many of them. And in a 12-teamer and shallower, the waiver wire, especially for hitters, is more plentiful than ever. So I go into my drafts knowing this, that I am going to be using the waiver wire. Everyone will tell you, I know it's the way in fantasy football, definitely, but it's even more so in baseball. You can't win a league with your drafting like that. Silly sport. And it means that you have to use the waiver wire. So it's best for you to embrace this and draft in a way that is ready and positioning you to get the most value from your team by allowing you to get guys off the waiver wire out of the gate. The first week, the first 2 weeks of the year, you will find some of the guys that are the most valuable. Garrett Crochet, Jack Flaherty, Seth Lugo, Tanner Houck. These were guys out of the gate. Jared Jones, Ranger Suarez,
right?
Not drafted in your leagues last year. This is all players after 276. There are so many. Spencer Schwellenbach, Robbie Ray, Cody Bradford, Reese Olson, Spencer Arrighetti, a ton. They gave you so much value last year that were just not on your teams. Luis Heel. And there's even some in season that aren't like, okay, you hold on for months. It's just maybe a couple weeks or so at a time, but they were legitimate values. I mean, Brady Singer had an amazing start to the season. Kate Povich was solid at his moments. You had Albert Suarez doing well. Javier Assad, everyone was obsessed with in the beginning. Grant Holmes, the real estate broker, he was great. Bowden Francis, the one that I refuse to draft now. Well, he had those 8-10 starts that were really good. Every single year, this is the case. And this is just for starting pitchers. I didn't even get to hitters. So you have to approach your draft knowing it's not a best ball league. But Nick, I only get 3 pickups in my league. Well, then this draft guide isn't for you. Okay? If it's specific and nuanced, just come talk to me on my live stream at playback.tv/pitcherlist every weekday morning. Yes. Go to sign for PL Plus, get access to our Discord and ask there. But from the heavy majority of you, it is not a best ball league.
Yes. And as we have said multiple times, Nick and I both approach our rankings and our strategy from a 12-team league perspective. So things like, one of the things that Nick has in here in the draft guide is the frizzle method, which is something that you've talked about repeatedly, right? Which is making sure that you're taking chances, you're making mistakes, and as you said, getting messy. And like in the back of your drafts, we're not going after boring guys, right?
No,
Our final
Toby's
picks, we
no.
should be going after, we're swinging for the fences. We're going after guys who could be home runs if they hit. If they're not, as we love to say on this show, like we want people that we can make immediate decisions on, right? So my 3 reserve pitchers, I did a 12-team NFBC online championship last night. The 3 pitchers that I drafted who are not my starters are Dustin May, Max Meyer, and Jose Soriano. And it's like, I know, I think the upside is high for all of those guys, and I'm going to know real quick if I'm getting that upside or not, and I can play the wire if I need to. Obviously, if you're in a deeper format, then yes, those guys like Merrill Kelly and those guys like Michael Waka and pitchers like that, they have added value. So just know that like it's all different to the league types. What we are going to discuss today is a draft strategy primarily geared towards 12-team formats.
Absolutely. So what I like to do, and this is really just getting into it here, is I did some mock drafts and it confirmed what I wanted to do. I actually did one where I was in the first slot and I did not draft my first pitcher until round 10. I don't think that is what you should do. I think it's very risky. I think it requires a certain number of quality pitchers to still be available. I also think that was the beginning of March and helium has arrived for some of the ones I got. Predominantly, I think Justin Steele and Robbie Ray were the main focuses of those. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that necessarily every time if I suggest it. So what I say is generally round 7 or round 8 is when you really want to start targeting it. There is ADP out with Fantasy Pros, and I did the entire draft guide based around that. It suggests that there might be leagues where you can get Jacob deGrom in the 6th. And oh my gosh, if you can get Jacob deGrom in the 6th, I get it. Okay. I think deGrom is set for such an unreal season, and it's going to be a hard stop. So it's going to be deGrom plus whatever you get on the waiver wire. That is a huge deal. That is not just like, oh, but he gets hurt and I won't get many innings. You will, because it will be deGrom plus. So if you think like the general roster spot's like 160 or so, something like that, then like you will probably get something close to that out of deGrom and plus, hopefully, of course, deGrom with his healthier elbow than others will do that. So he's the one pitcher that I have labeled here before the 8th round. Do you agree with that, Eric?
I have one other pitcher.
Okay.
And I will say that I agree with most of what you said. I have found that in my drafts, I don't have the chutzpah to wait that long.
Okay.
That I tend to like to have one guy who I would consider like a locked-in fantasy ace. The issue is that the injuries to George Kirby and Garrett Cole have meant that like outside of the guys I have like kind of in my top 9, it starts to get like you get into this like Yamamoto, Cease, Snell, Sale tier of guys where like I don't want to use a top 5 or 6 round pick on a starter like that because I don't know that they're definitely going to be that much better for me than some of the guys I could get in round 8, 9, whatever. However, I have been taking a lot of shares of Michael King.
I knew you'd say Michael King
as my first pitcher because he tends to go in the 60s, which means that in a 12-team league, I can get him towards the end of the 5th round. Sometimes I've gotten him at the start of the 6th round, and I feel really good about getting 4 or 5 hitters that I like and trust, and then getting Michael King because I feel like he's a really safe starter with the upside based on what we saw from him last year to kind of carry a staff that I know is going to have a really good SP2, SP3 or whatever because of how I'm going to wind up drafting.
Now, what I've seen is that generally when it gets to the 8th round, you should be able to get Joe Ryan.
Yes.
He's the one that I think has fallen more and surprisingly more than others. I have seen it is crazy, Eric. You remember us in First Pitch Arizona? It was this is actually what I think we're going to do every year, which is like my favorite thing ever. is if you guys don't know, the First Pitch Arizona, it's this amazing conference held by Baseball HQ. It's the moment that really the fantasy industry gets to hang out and see each other for like the only time of the year.
Yeah.
And I recommend anyone who's just listening, wants to hang out with and meet everybody and just talk about baseball the entire week and go. So we have our On the Corner podcast live there. And I decided, you know what? I want to make this as interactive as possible instead of us just performing in front of them. So Eric and I stood up in front of the auditorium or whatever it is in the room and projected both of our rankings to the wall. I'm banging on this wall, pointing at them. And it's like, all right, guys, we're going to talk about 1 through 20 right now. Here is a mic just standing out there for anyone in line to ask any questions about this. And we're going to keep going. And I think there were 2 pitchers that we got like the biggest, are you joking about? Maybe there's a couple. First was Garrett Crochet, which is wonderful now. But he was at like ADP 51 or something in NFBC at the time, like SP 13. And we're like, nah. Now, of course, him going to the Red Sox, I think changed people's minds a little bit and benefited with the wins part. Yeah. Still, I think I'm happy about that. The other one's Spencer Schwellenbach, where we both had him around like 2025, I think.
I will admit I didn't. I had him in my mid 30s and I felt like I was high on him, and then we started talking and I realized I was not.
I was like at 23 or something like that.
Yeah, he's bumped up for me as well. But at that point in time, I was still a little late to the game.
Well, I mean, the thing is, right now, the reason I'm bringing it up is because Schwellenbach is in the same realm as Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez and Tanner Bybee on ADP realm. And I love Spencer Schwellenbach. And honestly, I get it. And it's fine. I'm surprised I'm not able to get him as my SP3 anymore, is what I'm trying to say. So he's in that group. And there really is just this large group. And yeah, please.
I was just going to say, another guy who's just in that same range, if I'm using just NFBC data, which is different from the Fantasy Pros, but NFBC data for 12 team drafts, which is the online championships, going only 2 picks ahead of Joe Ryan has been Max Fried.
Yeah, love that
and one. I know you and I are big in on Max Fried, and his ADP is 90, which means, that's like around the 8th round.
Yeah.
And so if you're getting Max Fried, if you want to roll the dice and wait and get Max Fried, you could, double tap Max Fried, Logan Webb, Max Fried, Tanner Bybee, Max Fried.
I want to quadruple tap, Eric. This is what I do is I go 6-7 rounds of just hitters. Then I go, okay, let me lean back here. And I just go after starters because, I mean, really what it comes down to is inside of a draft, you have to identify where are you getting the most bang for your buck relative to the positions, right? And it's pretty clear that hitters are dominating it for the first 6-7 rounds. And then there is a massive drop off of what you get. There's a lot more of the sameness in the back half of it. While for pitchers, because there's a higher number of them that are effective, then it pushes them all the way over here. But this is where you got to seize it. So this is why I've structured it like this. I know everyone hates seeing weight on pitching. It's really nervous. It's anxiety inducing. But I can't emphasize enough the gap between that guy you get in the 4th round, whoever it happens to be. You really wanted Logan Gilbert. Awesome. Fantastic. Remember that you didn't have an ERA under 3 last year and was not that great on the road. But fine. Go get him. There is not going to be a major difference between him and Joe Ryan this year. I really don't think you're going to feel that at all. And you will if you're going after, I don't know, your second base and you get yourself Ozzie Albies and now you're stuck with Luis Garcia Jr. or something. I don't know what it is, but that's the kind of gap we're talking about. And go get all of these dudes and don't worry about which one it is. Really, when people say, hey, Nick, how do you feel about my team? I just count. He's got an SB1, yet 2, 3, 4. I don't say it's this specific one or that specific one. If you have Pablo Lopez instead of Tanner Bybee, okay, great. I slightly prefer Lopez, but Tanner Bybee is great too. It's just about getting 4 guys you won't drop. They're inside of that realm of just I'm going to have something good. Hopefully it breaks on the good side, not the bad side, and then opening the door for all the fun stuff after.
Yeah. I will say I had a similar article, but it's focused just on pitching over at NBC Sports, which is just called Starting Pitcher Draft Guide for Fantasy Baseball 2025. And so Nick and I are kind of using both of ours, but
Yeah.
I broke mine up into like 5-round increments. And so, for me, between round 6 and 10, I'm generally getting 2 starters, but I've gotten the one before, like the Michael King share. But I love getting 2 of like Freed, Joe Ryan, Tanner Bybee, Logan Webb, Shane McClanahan goes in the top 120 picks. Justin Steele, who you and I both really like, is pick 120, which is exactly like the very end of the 10th round.
Amazing.
I've loved getting Justin Steele as my number 2. In some leagues, I got Ryan and Steele like in my back-to-back picks, and they were my starting pitcher 2 or 3. The issue where you and I differ is sometimes I use a pick I like to get one closer that I feel like super confident
this
about,
is
which
the thing I'm figuring
takes
out.
the spot of a starter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely understand that. And there's a part of me that even says, you know what, Nick, maybe in that 8th round, you just take like the best one who's there.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is that, for example, my last draft is actually the Wednesday night before opening day. And I tend to see that there are closers who have established themselves as the closer by then.
Yeah.
That because ADP doesn't have it updated fully, then you're able to absolutely go after once the wonderful ham sandwich of pitchers, right? The explosion that I go for, there's usually when I come out for air, like round 150 or so, there's a Trevor McGill. I'm like, beautiful. Love you on my team. Then Justin Martinez is confirmed to be the closer in Arizona. And I'm like,
would be great if he was.
Amazing. Fantastic. So like that's generally how I see it. But if I'm actually going through my draft and I'm seeing that, oh no, like there really isn't anyone that I think might survive, I would certainly interrupt this flow and be like, Nick, it's okay. Just get one of those, because I do not encourage punting.
Right.
I think getting at least one that you feel is locked in and good can make a huge difference and at least give you an opportunity head to head. Because what gets lost a bit is, hey, it's only like 4 or 5 saves that wins you a week. And if just have one guy, it changes everything.
I love getting one and then take a bunch of flyers toward the end. And as you're seeing, like right now in Cincinnati with like Alexis Diaz can't throw strikes, and they're like, well, Scott Barlow's closed before, and it's like, okay, well, Scott Barlow is free in drafts, right? And you could take him with your last pick. So like, I like having the one closer at the top that I feel really confident in, and then can play the fringe game at the end.
It's really, I say this so often, of just head-to-head leagues are different, guys, especially with like batting average. It's a small sample of like 120 plate appearances a week or whatever that you get, or at bats towards batting average, and it's a 260 average versus a 250 for your team is one hit like a week. Like 1.2 extra hits, which is like, that's not okay over a whole week. You don't know what's going to happen between your team and the opponent's team. That's not the thing to shoot for. It's the consistency of the other stats.
Yeah. We've got some more pitchers to name for you, some targets, but we're going to do that after this break. All right, before we jump in, there is some heated debate in the comments. If you guys are listening live, feel free, jump in the comments, let us know. Comments about my Michael King discussion of whether waiting and grabbing Nick Pivetta is better than taking Michael King because Pivetta is a better pitcher than Michael King. I will just say there's a comment from Kevin about how Pivetta hasn't had an ERA under 4 over the last 4 years. I will also say Nick put out a tweet. Nick Pivetta has never had an ERA under 4.
Never.
Ever.
He's the only one. What's the funniest part about that tweet, Eric, is that I put it out being like, oh, this is an interesting thing. Nick Pivetta hasn't had an ERA under 4 in 8 years, in his entire career of 8 years. Like, everyone else, name a pitcher, has done this, expecting to have more. There was none. There's literally 0 as a starter the entire time and as an active starter now. He's the only one I could find that's Nick Pivetta. That's wild.
Yeah. And he has thrown over 155 innings just once since 2018. So there's also, you're baking in some of the health risk, the innings totals risk with Pivetta. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but I mean, we're not out on Pivetta, but I wouldn't build my draft strategy around Nick
I'm just
Pivetta.
going to get in on this really quickly right now. I am in on Pivetta because when it comes to the second half of this draft, as we're going to kind of enter in now, you should stop caring about innings. Just, hey, I need that. No, you don't. If you have your 4 that you think are, hey, I'm going to be here.
Right.
And they are starting out of the gate. And you feel like, okay, cool, I'm going to make a quick decision on Nick Pivetta or whatever. Then I don't care what he's doing in July. Like, hopefully it's good. But you're at the point that this guy is more likely to be off your team than on your team. So if he gets hurt during the year, fine. But as of right now, Nick Pivetta is in a good situation where he's the SP3 for a winning team. Darvish is fatigued. So, yeah, it's good to pitch in San Diego in the colder weather. It suppresses home runs, which is the biggest problem for Pivetta. And then it gets a lot worse in the summer. So I'll take Pivetta now at the end. I have some innings at the beginning of the year, maybe some wins and that, and then I move on.
Right. You're talking about taking him once you have your top 4 established, though. And that's where, like, if you're deciding between a guy, and I know nobody's really deciding between Pivetta and King, but the idea is, like, if you're deciding between pitchers like that early on in your draft, and it's like one of the top 3 guys that you are trying to get, then the innings totals do matter if you have a little bit more of a surefire kind of like locked in pitcher in there in terms of like the innings totals that you are going to get. I will say, like, again, there's a comment in the chat about Nick Pivetta's whip. Yes, it was a 113 whip last year. Remember that the 112 whip in 2023, he spent half the year in the bullpen. So we do have to take that into account when you're factoring in his ratios, that he was a reliever for a big chunk of the year. And then Pivetta's whip for his career is 1.32. He was a 1.38 whip guy in 2022, a 1.3 whip guy in 2021. So Pivetta really only has one season as a plus whip pitcher, but he has been a starting pitcher for 8 years in the big leagues, unlike Michael Pivetta, who has been a starting pitcher for 1 season. So at some point you need to look at the career norms of a pitcher like Pivetta and what he has produced. And I think we find the 113 whip is a little bit of an outlier. He's probably closer to like a 119, 1-2 kind of guy. Anyway, we're in this range with the starting pitchers where I did rounds 6 through 10. Nick has done rounds 8 through 12 in his article, but you're getting into this range here where, like, kind of like starting in round 7 or 8, 8, you can really load up on starters. I'd like to make sure that after the first 12 rounds of a 12-team draft, I feel pretty good about having 4 starters. And if you're like Nick, that could be 8 hitters, and then 9, 10, 11, 12, right, you get 4 starters if you want to mix and match. But like just some of the other names that are here toward the back end, Robbie Ray is flying up drafts right now, but you and I are enamored with Robbie Ray in terms of where his draft price is. We have seen Robbie Ray be a top 15, 20 starter in fantasy. You don't have to draft him as such. He's a guy we really like in the 8 to 12 round range. We already talked about McClanahan and Sandy Alcantara coming off injuries, but having been former aces. And yes, they might not throw 200 innings or whatever, but they look like themselves on the mound. You're going to get solid production out of them. Hunter Green, Justin Steele, we mentioned. Jared Jones, who I think looks really good this spring. I do think the sinker is good for Jared Jones as just another fastball. He really has made improvements to that changeup. I think it is a better pitch, and that's really important for him, especially against lefties. You have Brian Wu on your list as somebody who, we know the upside of Brian Wu when he's healthy. I personally am totally fine in this range with grabbing somebody like Sonny Gray. I know that Sonny Gray doesn't have all of the upside of some of these guys, but like if Sonny Gray is my SP3 or 4 because I waited and maybe I did take upside guys, maybe I did roll the dice on a McClanahan, or I guess Justin Steele isn't really like he's a pretty safe bet.
But Sandy Alcantara, you got to wait on. Maybe you spend on Strider to wait on that one.
I think Sonny Gray has always been a relatively productive guy, even if we don't get his season from last season.
I'm really out on Sonny Gray. I think it's more that I actually, just to let you guys know, I do plan I think on updating my ranks one more or two more times for the start of the season, maybe this week before the drafts happen. But two guys that have really surprised me lately that make me really scared are Sonny Gray, who had diminished velocity yesterday, not a good feel for that sweeper, and really is just kind of, I mean, he overperformed massively when it comes to the strikeout rate last season. And I just see too many, like Christopher Sanchez just seems safer to me. Even Jack Flaherty is just a better version of what Sonny Gray does, in my view. Carlos Rodon to me is more of a better win chance arm and pretty much similar in a lot of ways as well of the volatility. So I find myself just gravitating towards them while Sonny Gray has a higher draft stock. Kodai Senga is the one that's actually also scaring me that I was initially went in on, but I've yet to see him actually look good this spring. In his most recent outing, it was velocity down about 1 to 2 ticks, not full 2, I think it was, without good feel of the cutter and the fastball, like barely through the ghost fork. Like Kodai Senga, I'm just assuming is normal and good and ready to go. And I've yet to see actual indication of that. So I'm a little weird on that one. I feel less safe making him my SP4 at the moment because that could be just a bad situation. So that's why I think I'm being as aggressive as I am and making sure like by the 12th or really the 11th round that I have my 4.
Yeah, that's fine. And I will say for people in the comments that are saying Sonny Gray is hurt, we don't know that he's hurt.
No, we don't.
The Cardinals haven't said that he's hurt. He says he's not hurt. He's ready to go. We understand that he didn't pitch well the other day, but they're not connecting it to an injury. And this is a guy who has been doing this for a very, very long time. And so spring training stats for a guy like Sonny Gray mean a lot less than for a guy like Jared Jones, who we're trying to see if he's changing things around. I don't think your opinion of Sonny Gray should change based on his poor outing yesterday. You were either in on him as a pitcher or you weren't, and there are valid cases for both for sure.
Right.
I will say just another guy who you currently have in your article on the fringe of this range, but is fast rising up boards is Christopher Sanchez. And Christopher Sanchez is a guy that you might wind up having to take in the 12th round if you really want him in your upcoming drafts. And you just have to make that call yourself personally. Like, do I believe in this enough that like I'm going to fully buy into the helium now that it is like really drastically rising? Remember that Sanchez is up 2 ticks, and that's great, and that's going to help, the sinker. And that's did he go down a little bit? I was just going to say, but part of our excitement early on was he said he was adding a new pitch. He was throwing the cutter. We thought that would be beneficial for him. He's used it like 2 times.
Yeah, he stopped throwing it,
and it's not really doing much.
No.
So if you're buying into a breakout for Christopher Sanchez right now, the only reason you're buying into a breakout for Sanchez is velocity is up, and that's going to make him a better version of the pitcher we have seen before.
That's a great point, Eric. I'm happy you said it because, yeah, I know I've certainly pushed it myself. Like he's throwing 97, and he was doing for a while, and he was at 95.7 in his last one. And it's possible he just lands at 96.5 or something like that, and that's totally fine. He had a 9 hit per 9 last year. So Christopher Sanchez just gets that to 8, which is league average. And generally when we talk about these good starters, they're like 7.5 or something like that. So if Christopher Sanchez can do that, which I really was believing based on the new velocity and the cutter, then his whip goes way down as he has such a low walk rate, right? That's really the big thing about Sanchez because we think the ERA should be good. Wins should be good. He's going to be going deep into games, all that kind of stuff. It's just about can you just keep the whip at a reasonable level? And we don't need him to be a 25% strikeout guy. 22, 23 should happen if he has that cutter. And also maybe a little bit more velocity too. So I'm not necessarily out on Christopher Sanchez, but it's not as secure of a, oh no, I got my SP5. This is easy right here. What I will say is that I'm finding that there are more guys in the 16th label, like later on in my guide.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to drop these guys all year.
Oh, we are going to talk about one of those guys, Nick.
Yeah.
But I should just note, when I say his draft price is going up, I mean, over the last 30 NFBC online RotoWire online championships, which are 12-team drafts, Christopher Sanchez is going pick 135, He has his highest ADP is 106. So somebody took him pick 106. Christopher Sanchez is going 4 picks after Sandy Alcantara, 5 picks after George Kirby, 6 picks after Robbie Ray, 7 picks after Jared Jones. So Sanchez is going in the same area as you could get Jared Jones, Robbie Ray, Sandy Alcantara, Jack Flaherty, Kodai Senga. And I think, I know you and I are going to take Jared Jones and Robbie Ray over Christopher Sanchez in that round pretty much every time. You might even take Senga over Sanchez. So that's why I'm saying that in terms of like Christopher Sanchez inflated draft price is like some drafts he's going pick 106, he's going pick 110. Like you may really have to decide you want him that much to get him
right
at that price.
I'm absolutely I'm with you there. But there are some guys. Oh man, we gotta talk about them.
We do.
In the 16th. I mean, I know one is Gavin Williams, of course.
Yes.
You want to.
Oh
now, I do want to say this about Gavin Williams, okay, guys? I am a little disappointed so far, and I know everyone's going to go, "What? How could I possibly be disappointed by a guy who had 24 whiffs and 2 starts on his 4-seamer? Because he's always had this 4-seamer, guys. This is the good thing about Gavin Williams. So what is it that I want from him? Well, it's him to be improved. And I have not seen an improved Gavin Williams yet. I've seen a healthier one, but I have not seen a consistent secondary that gets
slider.
Strikes. Slider has not been the pitch that we want it to be. It is at 86. It has been in and out in games. He threw one of them just 7 times in one game, and it wasn't that good. The curveball has been thrown more at times with it, which is still a low strike rate. I don't think that the ultimate solution. I mean, look, if Gavin Williams is throwing a 65% strike rate slider at 86, I am so happy. I'm thrilled, and that's great. I don't feel like I'm seeing that now, and I'm not seeing a cutter either at 90 and plus.
But remember, he said that. I talked about it when I talked to him in Arizona. He said he's not throwing the cutter in spring training because he doesn't want to throw it in Arizona because he doesn't like the movement profile of the pitch in Arizona, but he plans to use it in the season. So either he lied to me to my face, which he could do because we've never met each other before, and it was the first time.
But is it going to be good when he does? Because it wasn't that good last year.
The cutter?
It was inconsistent for him. It wasn't a
Well, but that was because he wasn't trying to throw it as a cutter. He was trying to throw the slider, and the movement profile of the slider was all out of whack. And so he went into the offseason, fixed the slider to get it back to the slider he had used previously, and then said, but I will keep this harder version of the cutter. But then said, I don't like throwing the cutter in Arizona. So I really do think like you're not going to get a sense of his full arsenal until he leaves Arizona, and that is a risk. And I will say, when I wrote my article, Gavin Williams's ADP was 197. It is now pick 176. So he has
like 240 back in like November.
Right. So he has jumped up over 2 rounds just in the last like week and a half. So it's a little bit of the same thing, Christopher Sanchez. Now again, he's going 40 picks after Christopher Sanchez. So it's still not the same. Like, am I taking him at this cost that I'm taking somebody like Christopher Sanchez? But you're not getting Gavin Williams in the same range you were before. However, I'll just give you some names here.
Please.
Gavin Williams is going right around Yusei Kikuchi, Seth Lugo, Reynaldo Lopez, Clay Holmes, Shane Baz. And so it's like, none of those guys is like locked in for me. Like I'm taking Gavin Williams before I would take Kikuchi and Seth Lugo, especially in like a 12-team format. Reynaldo Lopez, who I still don't fully trust. I know what he did last year. I understand Shane Baz. I have them ranked really similar, so I get that argument. And then the Clay Holmes thing is like, I could see it if you're really buying into the Clay Holmes spring. I could see saying I'd rather have Clay Holmes. I have Gavin Williams ranked higher. I'm not going to shame you for taking Clay Holmes over him. But yeah.
I appreciate you saying this stuff because I must have missed that comment about the cutter and forgotten about that one. It does make me more encouraged about it because I feel like that's really what ties the whole room together. It's the rug here.
It is the rug.
And I am a little concerned that it's, I remember hearing actually Matthew Boyd saying, hey, look, I'm not going to throw my slider because I want to work on my changeup in the spring. And then all of a sudden his slider wasn't good in season.
Mhm.
And there's something to that a little bit, especially when you have a cutter like Evan Williams's that wasn't as refined as I wanted it to be last year. I was really looking forward to him getting those moments, those reps with it that he would be. That said, I think that when he has all four of those working, especially a high strike rate cutter, all of a sudden that 9 to 10% walk rate turns into 7-8%. And that's a huge thing. So
Yeah.
really excited about that one. And I do want to say Seth Lugo is actually pretty solid. Like I hate. I just like him so much more than Kikuchi and Reynaldo Lopez. So
yeah,
like Gavin Williams and Seth Lugo as your SP5 and 6 is like that's golden. That's amazing.
I want to wrap up this section of through 16.
Yeah.
I think these are like you're probably not dropping these guys. You feel pretty good about them. Some of them as your SP4, some as your SP5 or 6, whatever it is. But now that Gavin Williams has kind of pushed up a little bit in this range, you are seeing Ryan Pepio, Gavin Williams, Clay Holmes, and Shane Baz kind of all in the same like 10 pick range. Do you have a clear preference for that? Or is this one of those things where you're like, if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to get a starting pitcher in this range, I'm pretty comfortable with whichever one of those guys falls to me. And depending on where I'm at, I'm like, sure, I'll go with Pepio. Sure, I'll go with Williams. Sure, I'll go with, Clay Holmes. I will say personally, I have drafted a lot of teams where I get 2 pitchers in this range. And they're usually like my SP4, SP5. I have a lot of teams that it's Pepio Gavin Williams or Baz Gavin Williams or Arrighetti Gavin Williams, who also is in this range, where like if that's my SP4, SP5, like I get that it's risky because they're a little bit later and you're banking a little bit on upside.
Yeah.
But in a 12-team league, I'm okay doing that because like I don't think these guys are going to be so bad that you're dropping them. They may be guys where you pick and choose starts, but I trust that I could find something on the waiver wire too to help out. And I'm okay with taking 2 guys in this range at 4 and 5. Are you?
Yeah. So Ryan Pepio, I keep going back and forth about because man, I love his stuff. I think it's so good. I am a little weirded out by the Rays and their whole situation in X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've been leaning towards Gavin Williams and Grant Holmes a lot. I think that the real estate broker, Grant Holmes, not the Adobe, Clay Holmes. Grant, I think the thing that really just recently made it click for me was, what has been the biggest argument against Grant Holmes? Oh, he doesn't go deep into games, right? He threw 93 pitches on Sunday. Yeah. Or actually, it was on Sunday. He threw 93 in 5 1/3. And that was actually not the best version of Grant Holmes. It was 3 whiffs over 42 of his breaking balls. So if he's in his, not his best day going 93 pitches in 5 1/3, hi, this is a quality start guy for Atlanta. I am so in on that. And that's 2 breaking balls that have a 20% plus swing strike rate. It's really, he's one of the best targets I think you can go for. And the thing is, I love Arrighetti. I think Arrighetti could be great too. The Astros obviously need him to go. He's going to have that long leash. He's had some weird bad starts, and I feel like those aren't fully eradicated from him. But there is a clear path towards Arrighetti being a 25% strikeout rate guy with good enough ratios that you're fine with, and those wins as well. Mm-hmm. Shane Baz, I've turned away from.
I've pushed him down. I'm okay drafting him some places, but I'm not as high on him as before. I will say that I think a lot of people have too. He's now going pick 190 on average in the last 30 NFBC online championships. That's down around Brandon Pfaadt, Zach Eflin, Mackenzie Gore. And so in that range, I'm a little bit more comfortable taking the gamble on Shane Baz, because that's much lower than when we were talking about him just a few weeks ago.
And I worry that he's in my head turning into a hipster, heading inducing pitcher, stifling the entire roster. These are the kind of pitchers you don't want to draft, because I don't think I'll be able to make a quick decision on Shane Baz.
Mhm.
And my confidence in him has dwindled a bit as the four-seamer's shape and everything is not nearly as good as we want it to be. I
What if
know he hit 100, but then he also averaged a lower velocity as well in another start. He had a 4-walk game the other day. Like there's weirdness going on with Shane Baz, and he doesn't
I
have his old slider. And it's the whole Rays situation. Are they going to let him go 90 pitches every start?
well,
I don't know.
the
Yeah.
other whole Rays situation, as we've talked about, is that Zach Littell needs to make this team because he has no minor league options.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like, as we start to get closer and closer to the start of the
Oh
season,
no.
there's a voice in the back of my head that's like, you could see the Rays make Drew Rasmussen their SP5 and let Shane Baz start the year in AAA. And like, I never would have thought that heading into this season. And I still don't, I'm not saying that is going to happen. What I'm going to say is like, Shane Baz has a 9.64 ERA. He has 5 walks to 4 strikeouts in 9 1/3 innings this spring. Like, that's more than enough ammo for the Rays to say, you're not really missing bats. The command of the pitches isn't there. We're going to have to sort this out in AAA to start the year, because it's an excuse for them to keep Littell,
Yeah.
to not have to cut Littell, and to keep Rasmussen in the starting lineup or the rotation, because Rasmussen has looked good and he's healthy at the start of the year and whatever.
Rasmus become one of my biggest targets. And we're gonna and just quickly about Clay Holmes, the Adobe. I don't dislike it. I just think that his two-seamer sinker is too erratic, and it doesn't create the consistent pitch efficiency that you normally see from a sinker baller. So I'm a little weirded out. I feel like you're gonna see a lot of 5 and change starts from him that are just a little messier than you want, and less of the ceiling of those really nice clean outings that you want to see. And that makes it a little tougher for me to go after. But I really want to talk about the guys that once we're like, okay, we know we're going to get value from them. Who are these flyers? How are we ranking these? How are we targeting, the Richard Fitts of the world, the Dustin May, the Brandon Woodruff, Shane Smith, and Sean Burke? How are we doing this? We're going to talk about all of those guys after this break. Oh boy, Eric, this is the fun part. This is the part that I mean, personally, I think I get the most dings for. And when it comes after the season, for example, last year I got a really mean tweet, honestly, about AJ Puck. And I'm laughing because I'm like, well, yeah, but then I dropped him and got Jack Flaherty. Like, that's the point. That's why I went after AJ Puck instead of waiting all season for Brady Singer to break out or to do that kind of thing. Like, that's why I do this. And there are going to be a lot of those guys that we talk about right now who are not going to work. However, you want your hand in as many of these pots as possible, because all you need is one of them to actually stick around, and you've made good value of those later round picks. So who are those guys, Eric, that you might be seeing in the late round that you would want to target?
Yeah. So as Nick and I talked about, we're talking about like kind of outside of the top 200 overall picks at this point in time. You've definitely gotten at least, if you're drafting like us, you've definitely gotten at least 5 starters, most likely 6. And now you're saying, okay, these are the guys who are either on my bench, and so I'm looking for upside, or these are guys who one of them needs to click to be my SP6, and I can fill out the rest of my rotation as is. So you are looking for guys with upside. As Nick and I have talked about a bunch, and we've written about, we're looking for guys that we can make early, clear decisions on, because we want to say after what we want to have to identify, like, what is the thing that will make this pitcher break out, and say, okay, so I'm watching for that in this first start or second start. And if I see it, then I know a breakout is coming or a breakout is possible. And if I don't see it, like Edward Cabrera would have been an example. I think we've both moved off him, but like, we know that like command is such a huge thing with Edward Cabrera, and not just am I throwing strikes, but am I actually spotting pitches?
Right.
If you see that, then you could say, oh, there's breakout potential. And if you don't, you say you're gone.
Exactly.
Outside of the top 200, I know you and I are both big fans of Reese Olson. He is currently going pick 240 in the last 30 NFBC online championships. I love drafting Reese Olson because we know he's locked into a starting rotation. We know that he has renewed velocity or more velocity, and that has his four-seam fastball is the big problem for him. And if he has a little more velocity and can kind of iron out that weakness a little bit, it might never be like an asset, but we just don't want it to hold him back as much. Jesus Luzardo is going pick 221. Love him after the first 200 picks because he's a guy who looks really good. I still am okay with Yu Darvish in that range. I know he's feeling fatigue, but like we don't really know what that means. Like I'm also about the same age. I'm a little older, and I feel fatigue all the time. And they didn't tell me it was in his arm. They just said he's feeling fatigue.
Sure.
In an IL league in this range, I have no problem with a guy like Brandon Woodruff. He was hitting 95 in the first outing. We know how good he can be. So if you're picking Woodruff, who's going around, pick like 240, 250, and you can stash him on the IL and wait till he comes back, which may only be like a month, because he's already pitching. He just needs to get built up to like.
I mean, that whole situation with the Brewers right now is something else because you also have Quintana, who's only 2 innings deep. So they don't, if Woodruff isn't ready, which it doesn't look like he is, you have Tobias Myers now also out. Logan Henderson's like the SP5. And also they might need a piggyback Jose Quintana, and that might be Davy Garcia, who went for 3 innings after Quintana. It's wild. I don't think I'd be going after Henderson at all with that. But yeah, with Woodruff, he's a really fun IL play. I know some people are out because it was reported at hitting 95 in his first one, not sitting. It's 1 inning. I don't think he's going all out yet. I think you also, if you got 96 from that and sitting that, then he's like a top 20 starter. And like, we didn't expect that either. I do want to go really quickly, if that's all right with you, Eric,
of course,
about some of these and just kind of quickly give my 2 cents on the most popular ones that I think a lot of people are thinking about later in their draft. So Dustin May, by the way, I'm still so in on. And I think that what's really important for everybody is to say, look, do I want to start him in their first game? And I think with Dustin May, you might not anyway, because it's Atlanta and he might not get those full innings. Fine. He's kind of one of those guys that I'm willing to just actually stash for 1 week because then it's Washington after that. And I think he'll be going 5+ innings after that and be really good. But if you're actually just looking for like one quick game, yeah, I'm okay with Sean Burke in his first start because he goes against the Angels and that's opening day. And getting an assessment on opening day is pretty dang cool.
Right.
That's a fun one there. Would get the Twins after that, and then going at Cleveland. I don't really know if I'd really want to do that. I don't really have the highest hopes for that, but it might work out. It might be something that is just, hey, I need something for the first opening weekend. Sean Burke there isn't so bad. On the other side of it's Shane Smith. Probably not. He'll get the Twins first and then go at Cleveland, it looks like. In his first 2, he throws hard, 96, but there's really not much else there. Win chances, again, not too high. So I don't think Shane Smith is the one. I would just do Sean Burke for that first one. Hope that the fastball is back up to 96 as he used to. But really more interesting guys that are actually the ones that we're targeting, right? I mean, I want to see how Walker Buehler looks. I mean, I think that's just a fun one of, hey, Walker Buehler, he used to be the guy, and he's going to go against the Rangers at Texas, who does not look like they're super strong at the moment without Adolis Garcia.
Well, no, so he just came back.
Is he okay? Is he? He is all right. That was
back. Okay. He's in the lineup, so their lineup should be fully healthy.
All right. So never mind. But still, I might still go with that with Buehler. Sure. But then, as I mentioned, Drew Rasmussen, I want everywhere. It might take again a week or 2, and he can't do all the stash guys. But Rasmussen, everything that we've heard is like he's looking normal, if not as good as he did right before Tommy John or the internal brace. That is a really good pitcher, guys. Yeah. And Jesus Luzardo has a phenomenal matchup. It's either the Nationals or Rocky Road, which Rocky Road isn't actually as good early on because they haven't been to Coors, by the way, guys. So they haven't been messed up by Colorado yet in the first like couple weeks. So be a little careful of Rocky Road the first couple weeks. It's not as secure as it is in like June. But Luzardo, to me, is a really good one, as you mentioned. There's the 2 guys, Ryan Weathers and Max Meyer. And I haven't been too aggressive on these 2. That said, Ryan Weathers and Max Meyer, if they're the SP 2 and 3 behind Sandy, then they do get Pittsburgh the first weekend. And I'm like, all right, I'll go after that, cash in 1 game or 2. If they're like so studly, then great, I've got it. If not, like, I don't feel the floor is that bad for that first opening weekend.
Agreed.
Then I can move on. But it is at Atlanta for the next one, and then possibly either the Mets or the Nationals. So
I'm going to jump in real quick just because somebody is aggressively knocking on my front door. So I'm going to go check who they are while you continue rattling off some names real quick.
Absolutely. There's Chris Bubich. I like Chris Bubich a lot. He is the SP5 right now for the Royals. He's at 93 miles per hour. His changeup has been a fantastic pitch for him. He's really leaned into it against right-handers, has a good slider against left-handers. He would be going at Milwaukee, which is great. And then he'd be following that up likely with Minnesota, leading off that one. I think those are starts that you want to make out of the gate. And again, I want to emphasize, you want to go with these starters that you want to start the first time through if you can, and especially try and target the SPs 1, 2, or 3 so you don't have to wait until Tuesday. Now, if you haven't drafted Chris Bubich, I'm okay. If he's out on the wire, you can just go and get Sean Burke and have him as the first starter. Get that one open day, see how they is, or get Max Meyer, get Ryan Weathers. And if you don't like them, Chris Bubich is the guy you go pick up. Same kind of thing with Richard Fitz with the Red Sox. He's going to be the SP4 likely, and then you might have Cooper Criswell instead of Quinn Priester as the SP5. The Red Sox, if he is the number 4 of this one, would be at Baltimore, which is not the best, but honestly, I think you're okay with that one. If he's the SP3, he'd be going against the Rangers, but Richard Fitz is a fun one to go and test as well. There's Jack Leiter, has gotten a lot of helium for as well. He would be going at Cincinnati likely in the first one, unless they're messing around with it, and he would go host the Red Sox in Texas. Leiter is a little interesting for me because it might be volatile and you might not know what to do. He's more of a hipster type to me than I would like to say, while the other ones I feel like will know quicker if it's going to click. That said, I think the ceiling is too high, and if it's a hard cut of Leiter, then fine. But just don't get stuck with Leiter if you can help it. And the last ones really for me that I do want to hit upon are the IL stashes, as you mentioned. So Woodruff, Giolito are the main two. Outside of, say, George Kirby, but I feel like you'd already taken. Same with
I will add, I like Brian Bayo. I like Brian Bayo as an IL stash. Okay. I know you don't always, I know you don't agree, but he's another guy who will be back in April.
Not a bad idea. April. It doesn't hurt to have Brian Bayo because it'll also be quicker for you to know what to do. Yes. Totally fine with that one. I don't know if Brian Bayo is going to be that consistent guy that we want him to be out of the gate. I think it might be tough to decide. But yeah, I don't think you do either. Right. But another one to consider here is Ranger Suarez, who actually is kind of still going late. And in his most recent outing was much more of his older self. If he's just normally going the rotation, well, as I mentioned before, it's either at the Nationals or hosting the Rockies. And I feel like that's just an easy win for you to get early in the season. And then there's Tomoyuki Sugano. And we don't know what we're going to get. Is this just like a Toby? I mean, that could be fine. They're going into they're going to be hosting the Red Sox for the second series. He is the SP4 or 5 likely, which again, I don't love. I try as much as I can to get those 1, 2, or 3s. So that would mean Max Meyer. That would mean Ryan Weathers are kind of part of that heavy crew if I can early on. Just because, again, that early start is so good to maybe get that first Sean Burke. But those are the ones that I've really been focusing on. I know there are others out there for you that you can latch onto as well. But those are the ones I've found myself saying, okay, cool. I'd like to take early stabs on these guys and then see how it goes.
Yeah. And I will say, like, we have a lot of similar names. I don't focus on the schedule as much as you, which I should. I want to point out, I'm not saying I don't because I don't believe in it. I'm just saying I'm like more prone to be like, I like this guy. I want to see what he's got.
I know. And that's Nick sometimes hurts me too.
But that is also you. I think it's a different strategy too, where like you play in a lot more head-to-heads than I do.
Sure.
And so in a head-to-head, if you're not going to use that guy for the first 2 weeks, it's not really as beneficial to have him on your team. If you're in a roto and there's an innings cap, and so you're not using every starter for every start,
right?
It's okay to have a pitcher where you're saying this guy's going to be on my bench for the first starter too, because it's not costing you anything,
right?
And so that's why I'm in on some of these other guys. I will say I am one person who's super happy to take flyers of Jack Leiter late. I think there's a few reasons why. First of all, Leiter's command has been an issue. It really improved in the minor leagues at the end of last year. In July and August last year, when he went back to AAA, he struck out 40 and walked 10 across 6 starts. 10 walks across 6 starts is, it's not nothing, but it's really not that bad, especially when you're striking out 40. His command looked better at the start of spring. The last 2 outings was not as good, but that's one of those things, like, that's why Jack Leiter is going late, because we don't know for sure he has a rotation spot locked up, even though with John Gray and Cody Bradford both starting the year on the IL, it's likely, but it's not a guarantee, because they could go with Kumar Rocker and Adrian Hauser and not Jack Leiter. Anyway, who knows? But that's why we talk about, like, these guys late, where you want to make a decision early.
Right.
Jack Leiter adding a sinker is important, because if he can throw the sinker for strikes, he doesn't need to rely as much on the fastball to be the only strike pitch to get ahead with, and then the fastball plays up for strikeouts. The kick change has looked really good for him this spring. Again, not a strike pitch, so he really needs that sinker to get ahead, but it deepens his arsenal a little bit. So there are things with Jack Leiter where I'm like, if you told me that Jack Leiter ends the season as a top 30 starting pitcher in fantasy, I could easily tell you the case of how that happens. I'm not saying it does happen, but what I'm saying is I could identify for you how that could come to be. And so I just look for that in the first 2 starts and see if I'm seeing any glimmer of that. If not, I'm cutting him. Same with Max Meyer, right? We know the changes Max Meyer made. I'm happy to do that. Jose Soriano, as I mentioned, is a guy I'm drafting late, because another guy where command is an issue for him. He's got a deep arsenal. He's got tons of swing and miss stuff. He can't really get ahead with his fastballs, but he has multiple variations of fastballs. And so if that breaks for him, if he can get better at pounding the zone with that, I think there's real upside there. Chris Bubich is a guy I'm happy to take late, who I see upside in. And then everybody has their pick in the Giants rotation.
Well, that's the one I actually wanted to end on a little bit. Actually,
you and I have been pretty down on Kyle Harrison since we've been doing this podcast together. And so, but I think that we approached rankings early on, assuming that Kyle Harrison was getting that 5th spot, because it just seemed like they were going to give it to him. And now I think it's been pretty clear from the Giants beat writers that he's probably on the outside looking in, and it would be either Landon Rupp or Hayden Birdsong who takes that last spot.
Are we 100% sure Jordan Hicks is too?
No, I mean, I think they should put Rupp and Birdsong both in the rotation and move Hicks out.
I'm going to sadden everybody here. I'm going to put some cold water on all of this. The opening schedule, the first 2 series for the Giants, is at Cincinnati, and then it's at Houston. And so let's just say I believe it's a 3-game set and a 3-game set. I could be wrong that it's 4 at Cincinnati, but regardless, if Rupp and Birdsong get it, then do we want to start them against Houston? At Houston? I don't think I do. Then they would be hosting Cincinnati.
I think it depends on that's the Christian Walker question, right? Does that Houston lineup have Christian Walker, or does it not have Christian Walker? Because if it doesn't have Christian Walker, it basically has Yordan Alvarez and Altuve, and I guess Yainer Diaz, but I'm not really worried about Isaac Paredes.
That's actually a good point. Maybe I am overrating the Astros offense there. That's a good point. I need to go, Lily. I'm so annoyed at myself. I haven't had an opportunity at all today to watch that Hayden Birdsong start. We didn't get any data on it, and I don't want to put too much weight on my eye test. But I imagine I'm just going to see the same exact thing as I always see. And he has that 18 strikeouts and 0 walks in 12 innings, Hayden Birdsong.
And that's crucial, because the command was always a thing where you're like, where is this pitch even going? I even want to point out, we don't know exact lineups, they're projections right now, but I will say, if you go to Roster Resource and you look at the Reds lineup, 4 through 9 is Austin Hayes, Heimer Candelario, Gavin Lux, Christian Encarnacion Strand, Jake Fraley, Jose Trevino.
This sounds good, 3 years ago.
Right. It's I don't want to pitch starters in Great American Ballpark, but I'm also this Reds lineup, I don't know. I mean, Encarnacion Strand we know can be has the potential to be good. But like, I don't know that I'm running from a lineup that has Austin
that's a good
Hayes and
point.
Gavin Lux hitting in the middle.
That's a very good point. I assume was it Ellie, McLean, Steer before that?
It's Friedel. No, Steer's hurt, remember?
Oh yeah.
So it's Friedel, McLean, and Ellie as the top three. So like this lineup is Matt McLean and Ellie, who people really like. I like both of them.
No, I think you're doing
a lot of
here.
guys where like, hey, they could have a really good game, especially in that home ballpark. Like Heimer Candelario can hit 2 homers in a game.
So, all right, are you drafting Justin Verlander to go in that Sunday start? No,
but I'm just out on. I'm just a little. I just don't.
That seems like a streamable win for me.
It does, but I'm so not sure how to think about Justin Verlander.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a 15-team league, I could see taking a gamble on that a little bit. But I don't know. I
think you might be able to get a fun stream out of that. There are last couple stragglers. As I look through, by the way, if you guys don't know my SP roundup, you can see the expected rotations for every team at the top of the article that I do, the spring training SP roundup. And so, I wanted to mention the Giants one as I gave another look through this to ensure I didn't miss anyone. And I did catch, of course, Nestor Cortez, who is going to be likely the SP2 out of the gate. And that's in the Bronx, which is so fun. I even put out a tweet about that like in January, like after the trade. I was like, hey, so if Nestor Cortez is the number 2 and number 3, he's going to be pitching for the Brewers in Yankee Stadium in his first game of the year, which is so cruel. I don't really want to do that. I can see it working after that, but it just feels like an unfun time. I have been seeing Nick Lodolo go pretty deep in drafts, and honestly, I will take that for the opening weekend as he's the SP3. And if you're able to get him in like the 20th round or something, like, yeah, all right, I'll take Lodolo. I'd even take Singer, believe it or not, hosting the Giants, because I think Singer has actually had a pretty solid spring, looking a little different. Maybe if Nick Martinez gets in there too, that could work. So I'm not against those at all. David Peterson could be the SP3 for the Mets.
Yeah.
And they are facing the Astros in Houston, and maybe that's good enough, exactly as you're saying. So he's another one that if you're looking for that quality start early to try and sneak in, just see how this goes, see if that change up and slider command is good for him. And the last one I wanted to bring up is a guy who really 2 guys who I think are very similar. And it's Chris Paddock and Casey Mize. Now, why they're similar is because they both have 7 feet of extension with 18 inches of vert on their 4-seamers. And it's 94.5 for Paddock, 95.5 for Mize. And they both have a splitter/split change, which it's split change for Paddock and splitter for Mize. And they both don't have a breaking ball that's very good. They're so similar, honestly, to me. With Mize being a little bit better, I think a little bit more consistent with his 4-seamer location than Paddock. But some people might be tempted to go after both of them. I'm not really against it because I can see how in a given game that could work with both of those 2 main pitches working. So if you want to chance that, I'd imagine they both are going to be the SP4s for their teams. So that would be at Seattle for Casey Mize, which is also what Olsen might be getting. Actually, no, I'm so sorry. Jackson Jobe as the piggyback for Kenta Maeda. That's my prediction. Could be Kider Montero, and honestly, that's the worst thing ever in Seattle because it's such a benefit to pitchers. And then you have for the Twins as the SP4 would be at the White Sox for Chris Paddock. And that Simeon Woods Richardson, I don't want to do, but maybe that Chris Paddock one ain't so bad. I just want to throw that out there, but I'm not drafting him for that because it's he's going to be the SP4. I probably would have someone I would want to drop before that would happen. Tristan McKenzie's not the thing anymore, guys. We don't need to do that one.
No.
And even though the velocity is there, he's such a wild cannon. That's, I think, really, maybe Bassett is someone that might actually be better than everyone's giving him credit. Just for the record, he might get the Nationals. If that actually happens, he gets the Nationals in his first start. Maybe. But then everyone's telling me that the Nationals are good now. So fine.
Yes, who knows? It is interesting. The Twins in that second series, they do get the White Sox. So you're going to have like Simeons, Wood Richardson, and Paddock facing the White Sox, which is going to cause some interesting decisions of like, I don't know that I really like them, but am I willing to take this gamble? And then I will say to everybody, like, I know there were some comments in the chat about like Will Warren and what's going to happen with the Yankees. I will say that like when the Yankees are projected to get to the end of their rotation, it's Arizona in New York. So like I don't know for sure that Will Warren is going to even get that spot. We talked about it in a previous episode, and then if he does, his first start is going to be against the Diamondbacks, and so it's like I don't know. I might wait and see how that situation.
Yeah, I don't think I would go with that one. I'm trying to get through every single one just to help all of you. Just like guys, like this is what you really should be thinking about.
Tyler McGill. I mean, he would face the Marlins, but it's like in that first start. But does he piggyback? I mean, who knows what the Mets are gonna be doing there?
That's not really. I mean, honestly, guys, I think that's roughly all you need. And the question I'm going to ask all of you now is, how are you watching these games? You're a baseball fan. You're watching baseball, right? And you're probably watching it alone, right? That's what I do all the time. You have MLB.TV up on a monitor and just whatever. The worst feeling is like you go to Twitter and you're trying to talk about the game or the Discord, and someone says, "Oh man, look at that strikeout." You're like, "What?" And then like 2 seconds later, it happens. It's out of sync. Something that's really, really cool is that we are streaming live baseball on playback for the entire season. That means when baseball is on, we are live showing the video of that game, not the game day or whatever, where you can show up, you put in your MLB.TV and you see the baseball game synced up with everyone in chat. I'm going to be on stage. I can actually bring on anyone from the chat to just hang out and announce the game with us. Eric is going to be there sometime on opening day with me. I'll be there
for 1 hour. I think we have it in the calendar somewhere.
We'll figure it out. But I'm going to be live stream from 12:45 all the way through the day until like 1 a.m. for all of the games that day. And anytime this season that baseball is on, we will be live on playback.tv/pitcherlist. Okay. I can't emphasize this enough. You are finally going to be able to watch baseball with a community that is respectful and passionate and wants to talk about the actual game, not sports betting, not their over-unders, not yelling at the players for being worse than you expected or whatever. It's just going to be us having fun watching baseball with a massive community. It's incredible. So join us on playback.tv/pitcherlist on opening day. This is Twitch for live sports, guys. It is the dream I've had for a decade. I kid you not. I've thought about doing this. I did this with Fast in my bedroom in 2016, just hoping that one day we could do this. And it's finally here. So I look forward to this. You're going to see a lot of surprises, including Eric Samulski on opening day, playback.tv/pitcherlist.
I'm looking forward to it. We're looking forward to talking baseball with everybody here through the whole rest of the season. And starting next week on our next episode, we're going to get into the list, our normal, regular episodes during the season, going over the list with you.
That's right.
We're in it. We're in it.
And I do want to say it is 100% legal, by the way, because it requires your MLB.TV login. So this isn't illegal. This is like truly approved and everything. Yes. It's amazing. Finally, we can do this, and it's all good. So join us, playback.tv/pitcherlist on opening day and throughout the entire season. Can't wait. Eric, thanks for joining me for this draft guide. And we're going to be talking every week about these rankings. Let's do it.
Watching baseball, talking baseball. It's that time of year. March Madness is here. It's a great time for sports. I am Eric Samulski, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollack, the Lion.
And I might go work on my bracket for a little bit. I'll talk to you later.